Welcome to Real Estate Resource. Thanks for stopping by. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you'll know when new videos are available. I really hope you enjoy this one. All right, so good morning again. Thank you guys for being here. I know that there is still a little bit of uncertainty, uneasiness as it comes with these practice changes that are a little over a month away. So just so you guys are aware, CRMLS is going to implement the changes of no offer of compensation on August 13th. Beginning on July 24th, the forms that we're going to talk about today will all be available, and that will be the only forms for you to use. So the current listing agreement that you've been using, the current buyer representation agreement you've been using, all of those things, even the purchase agreement is going to change just a tiny bit. So I'm going to talk about that, but it's nothing that is really going to affect anything. It's just some new verbiage that's in there, which I appreciate that they added. But all of those things are going to be coming on July 24th. Right now, they're only in draft form so that you can take a look at them and be prepared, and that's what we're going to look at today. But yeah, come Monday the 24th, and since I'm not going to be here next week, we had to take care of it. We had to cover it today so that you guys are prepared for that Monday the 24th when that's what you're going to be using. So before I share my screen, does anybody have any questions? Anything you need clarified? Any concerns that you're having? No? All right. So we're going to kind of run through these pretty quickly. I'm not going to go through we've already looked at the listing agreement. This one is just changed. Like we looked at the new version of the listing agreement about what it's going to look like. We've looked at it a couple times. This is just now the final revision, and they made some changes where they've taken some things out. It looks like we're getting a lot of people quickly, which means we're going to have a lot of people. And I think we're going to have a lot of people on this class just based on the questions I've gotten, for the last couple of weeks. So you can't unmute yourselves, but if you have a question, you just hit that little raise my hand in the chat and I will see that, or type it in the chat and I will see that. And then I'll unmute you for you to ask the question. All right. If nothing else, let's share my screen and get moving, huh? Let's see here. Sorry. Share desktop. All right. So you should be seeing right now just a blank desktop, but that's going to change in a moment. And the first thing that we're going to look at is the finalized listing agreement. Now, these are all red lines because it's all completely new, but this is what it's going to look like. So the top half of it is exactly what you guys are used to, right? Date prepared, exclusive right to sell, seller's name, broker's name, all that stuff. We don't need to review that. You know how to do that. Here is now the new listing agreement. And again, we've discussed this already in past classes, the new format of the listing agreement, which matches the format of the RPA that we've been used to for the last, a couple years, 3 years, whatever. They've updated it to this I don't know what you want to call it, the chart, wherever you want to say it, this way that it's set up where everything is in one paragraph. So for now, the listing agreement, just like in the purchase agreement, when we look at this, the way it's set up, everything in there is paragraph 3. In this listing agreement, everything that we're going to talk about is paragraph 2. Okay, so it's paragraph 2 is the terms of the listing agreement. Okay, and these are the subsections of that and what they reference. Okay, so we're not gonna go over the whole thing. We're not gonna go into the sections where we read. We'll do that later when we're diving into a listing agreement. But for today, I want you guys to see what the differences are so that you're prepared when it changes. So first change. There is a maximum length of a listing agreement. Okay, never had that previously. It doesn't exist in the listing agreement that we're currently using. But now your listing agreement cannot exceed 24 months. Okay, I don't think anybody's taking a 24-month listing, but again, now we know there's a definitive amount of time that you can't exceed on your listing agreements. So that means your begin date and your end date, just like we have on our current listing agreement. It has a begin date and an end date, and that listing agreement, the current listing agreement that we're using for the next, couple weeks, month and a half, right, whatever it is, 3 weeks, is not valid without a begin date or an end date. Just like this listing agreement would not be valid without a begin date or an end date. Okay. Next is the listing price, just like our listing, but just in this new format. Okay. This would be checking off for specific listings of manufactured home or a probate, and then that you would attach those addendums to it. Okay. But here's where the major change comes in, and it's the compensation. And the last time we reviewed this listing agreement, right, with the proposed listing agreement that was going to go into take effect for those practice changes that NAR did in their settlement, it had two separate sections of compensation. One of them was the compensation I received as listing agent, and one of them was the compensation that I would offer out to a broker, right? The additional compensation you would pay me for me to cooperate with an outside broker. That's been removed completely. The only compensation that is negotiated in this listing agreement is the compensation that the seller is going to pay the listing agent / broker. That's it, period. So what that says is that you can have conversations with the seller about them offering compensation to a buyer's agent or increasing your compensation for you to cooperate. Either way, you can have those conversations, but there is no contractual obligation. Okay? Which means that you, in your contract, you cannot make the seller obligated to pay a outside broker, only you. And so if you look at this compensation here, it says compensation to seller's broker, only seller's side of the transaction. It's a percentage of the list price and any other fees that you want to put in, or you could put a flat rate, or you can attach a compensation schedule. Okay. That's it. That's the amount they're going to pay you for representing them as seller. Okay. No more contractual obligation for them to offer compensation. So they removed that completely. So from the 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, whatever it was that we talked about this listing agreement last, the proposed listing agreement, they decided they were going to remove any offer of compensation from that listing agreement. Questions about paragraph 2C, paragraph 2C1. Anybody have any questions right now? Or you're all just too shy to ask? It's okay. I'm sure that things will come up. Okay, Bertha, go ahead.
What is the compensation schedule? Could you please explain?
A compensation schedule is just like, for example, you could, on a separate document, like an addendum or an amendment, you could state if the sales price is higher than a certain amount, the compensation is this. If it's lower than a certain amount, it's this. Instead of just being the fixed percentage of the list price, you could put terms on what the compensation is that they pay you as the seller's broker. Okay. Is that fair? Like, that makes sense, right? Okay, let's see. Armando, go ahead. You should be able to unmute now.
Go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so just understanding this, then 4B, then if they're going to pay us 5%, we just put 5% there. Then when the other agent calls you, what are you paying? If I'm going to do 2.5%, I just have verbally 2.5%, and that's it.
Yeah. So your option to pay something out of the compensation you're getting paid by the seller is up to you. If you do negotiate, if you get them to say, hey, I'll pay you 5% to list my house, that would be no matter who got represented, or if there was no representation, or like you found the buyer and you were going to represent the buyer, your total compensation would be that 5%. But the amount that the buyer's broker can receive is set by their buyer representation agreement. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the buyer representation agreement. So remember, even if the seller pays you 5% and you say, okay, well, I'm going to offer buyer's agents 2.5%, right? If they have a buyer broker agreement that states they're only making 1.5% or 2%, you can only pay them the 2%. You can't pay them the whole 2.5%, which means your seller now is going to pay you 5%, and you're going to make, 3.5 or 3, right? Not the 2.5 and 2.5 or whatever it is.
So us representing buyers, it would be very smart to first call the other agent. Hey, what are you paying? So that we put it in there.
Absolutely, that's the only way you're going to be able to do it. Okay. The only way you're going to be able, really the only way, right? I mean, as a listing agent, if I know that I'm going to offer compensation out of the compensation that I've negotiated, I can put it on my website. I can market that I'm going to do that. I can't be on the MLS, but I can state that I'm going to pay that compensation. It's just not contractually obligated by the seller to allow me to do that. It's just something that I'm going to do. And if the seller's going to pay compensation, I can say that. But again, it's not going to go in there.
Now, I don't know if this is premature. Then you know how we're going to be able to have closing costs. Now, if they're going to pay us, say 5%, and I'm going to pay 2.5% out, I could put 2.5% in closing costs, or no?
So that's that's again is a kind of a gray area, because the MLS is going to allow us to state that the seller's willing to pay concessions. Yeah, concessions. We cannot state anywhere in the MLS that those concessions can be used for compensation. So, and those concessions that they state, they're not obligated to pay the total amount. So basically what it's saying is, what the MLS is saying and what CAR's attorneys are saying is that if I say I'm offering you $15,000 in concessions, right, on the MLS, let's say I put that number in, some MLSs are not going to allow an amount. They're only going to say that the seller is willing to pay concessions. So I don't know yet if our MLS is going to show the total amount. If that changes come August 13th when they pull down the compensation offers, I don't know if they're going to show that concession amount. So the idea is that all I state is that they're willing to pay concessions. So even if I put, they'll pay you $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 in concessions, they're not bound by that number, which means if I get an offer that says $25,000 in concessions and I counter back and say, no, I'm only going to pay 10, I'm not in breach of any agreement. Does that make sense?
Kind of, yes.
Yeah, so what it's saying is you can't enforce the information on the MLS that says seller is willing to pay $25,000 in concessions. They're not bound by it like we were with the compensation previously. Yeah.
Right. So like when we get the offer, we could always change that, or that could be negotiated out.
Absolutely. And that's why I think what's ultimately is going to happen with those concessions and with compensation to a buyer's broker is it's really just going to be negotiated like all credits were in the past, which I'm going to ask for the seller to pay for compensation, and I'm going to include that in the price. I'm going to take part of, I'm going to in my equation, I'm going to say, well, their net is going to be affected by this much, so let's make our offer make sense. The problem with that is, just like with all the other credits, is you better make sure that you've done your comps and you know what's happening in the market, that the appraisal is going to come in, or else those things aren't going to get paid.
Got it.
Right? That's the way you have to look at it.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, Armando. And let's see, Zuli is next. And Melissa, I will answer your question.
Go ahead, Zuli. Do you know if the other websites like Zillow, Realtor, and all of those websites will be able to show an X compensation the way they're doing it right now?
I don't know. I don't know. If they're getting the information for the compensation from the MLS, the answer is going to be no. If they're going to make it possible for the agent to go in and make changes to what's on Zillow or Realtor.com, no. Realtor.com is probably not at all going to show any compensation because it's NAR, and they were the ones who were with the lawsuit. So I would imagine that that's going to be a no. I would guess that Zillow's probably going to be a no too, but I can't answer for them. And they're not, they're a public company. They're not part of NAR. They're not part of the people that were included in the lawsuit. So they can probably choose to do whatever they like. So I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. Darwin, go ahead.
Okay, but what you're saying is they're gonna say send you the contract they have with the buyers, so you know how much you can pay them.
That's they have to. They have to. They have to submit it. They have to submit it regardless to escrow, to you, the whole thing.
So that would be that way that we're gonna know how much we're gonna pay them, even though if we offer, like Amanda was saying, 2.5. So we're gonna the buyers. Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, Bertha, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So if we do have a listing contract this month, regardless, and we open escrow until after, this is gonna be in effect, we're gonna have to follow the rules, right? So
okay, so there's a form for use with listings that are now active and will continue to be active after the practice change. The sellers who signed those original listing agreements are bound by their promise to pay compensation, right? That their total compensation they're paying is going to be offered to cooperating brokers. And we'll discuss that when we get to the form that you'll need to have signed for all of your active listings that will exceed that August 17th date. So we'll get to that in a little bit, okay?
Okay, and another question. So just to clarify, okay, we agree 5% with the seller, and then there's concessions offer. So the buyer's agent comes and they request 2% or whatever, 2.5. I am the one who's paying for that, not the seller, right?
Well, that depends on how you've negotiated that with your seller. If your seller's willing to pay it, then it's going to be in the purchase agreement. If you're going to pay it, then it's probably not going to be in the purchase agreement, because that's a different agreement between two different brokers. Right now, the way that they expect for this to work, and there's going to be an updated CBC for how that's going to work without an MLS. Right now, the main way this is going to happen is a buyer is going to have to sign a buyer representation agreement with any agent he works with. Period. End of story. That has to happen. Done. You're going to submit that with a form called the SPBB that says, hey, seller, if you're going to pay compensation, here's the amount of compensation that I am promised by my buyer, and they're asking you to pay that for them. That's going to be probably one of the main ways that happens. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Bertha. And Alvaro, go ahead.
Can you hear me, Kyle? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm not sure if I missed this, but when is the buyer's agent's compensation binding? When does it become binding?
What do you mean, when does it become binding? You mean, when does the change go into effect?
No. I know that you're explaining that we're going to have to, let's say, call the listing agent or some way communicate with the listing agent and find out how much they're paying as compensation. So if they tell you, okay, we're paying 2.5, or like you said, can that change later on, or when does it become binding for the buyers?
No. It's still going to work. I mean, there's still forms. Like, so just let's pretend the MLS doesn't exist, right? Because as agents, the majority of us relied on the part of the MLS that said, if you stated in the MLS, you have to pay me, and that's how I'm protected, right? You can't change it.
Right.
So now what's going to happen, instead of doing what we should have been doing from the beginning, there was a form called the CBC, which is the Cooperating Broker Compensation Form, right? That said, you fill it out and said, hey, the MLS states this. This is what you're going to pay me. Everybody signed. There was no question. Well, now just forget that we can rely on the MLS to protect us. If you have a broker that says, I'm going to pay you, not the seller, me, then you'll have a CBC signed by the broker. That'll be enforceable because it's a contract. If the seller's going to pay it, it's going to be in your purchase agreement. So once it's in the purchase agreement, it's set unless you guys renegotiate something else. Right? Like, for example, I'm going to tell you what's going to change commission that never changed it in the past, or very rarely changed in the past. I write an offer to you for $700,000, so I can include $15,000 for you to pay my buyer's obligation to pay me, right? We negotiate like a credit, right? So I raised the price by $15,000 so that we could get $15,000 back as either a concession or your agreement to pay me a commission. The appraisal comes in, and it comes in $10,000 under that $700,000 offer. And now they say, well, wait a minute. I was netting an additional 15. That's why I was going to give it to you. Now I'm not. So the seller would have the right to say, if I'm going to reduce the price to the appraised value, I'm also going to reduce the amount of compensation I'm paying. Right? That's the only time you wouldn't be guaranteed, is if it was part of the negotiation was that it was based on the amount of compensation was based on the price. And once the price has to change, then the seller has a right to renegotiate everything. So now.
So that would be more of a concession, not compensation.
Yeah. Now, if you have a buyer-broker agreement, the CBC, right? We have that CBC between two different brokers, and the price changes. That's not affected the same because it's a percentage of the sales price. So you have to look at it. It's two different angles of how buyers agents are going to get paid and how we negotiate. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So let's move on. And then, okay, so Melissa's question in the chat, I think, got answered by all our conversations. Okay, so let's move on. So the next section on here is 2C2, right? 2C2, additional compensation to seller's broker if buyer is unrepresented. So here's something that's new, that's going to be new for you guys in the industry. Like we're used to for sale by owners, right? We have a seller that says, I don't want you to represent me, but if you bring me a buyer, I'll pay you X amount of commission. But you're not representing me. You're not going to do my disclosures. I'm going to sign a listing. I'm not doing anything like that, right? And they don't have any representation, so we have them sign a seller non-agency, and our hands are clean from any liability to the seller. Now, this is saying if I have your listing and a buyer who has no representation and chooses not to have any representation, but you still need me to do some additional work because I have to communicate with them differently. I have to help them with things even though I'm not representing them. What is the commission you're going to pay me in addition to facilitate that deal where a buyer has no representation? So that's something that's completely different, right? So this is additional compensation. So for example, let's say for me to represent you, you're going to pay me 3%, right? I'm the listing broker, you're paying me 3%. You may or may not be willing to pay a buyer's broker compensation. However we negotiate that, I'm okay with it, I get it. But if now in my duties as your listing agent, a buyer comes to me and says, look, I want that house, but I'm not going to pay you a commission. I can't agree to pay a commission. I'm not going to do it. And I don't want you to represent me because I can't pay that commission. This is an amount the seller will pay me just to do the additional work, not represent the buyer, but do the additional work necessary to make sure that we can close that transaction. So you won't be representing the buyer, but you're making a small additional commission because of the extra work and time you'll have to put in to do that deal because there is no agent on the other side. I know that seems a little confusing, so we got to just slow it down and digest it a minute. There will be buyers now that will not be represented by an agent. And in that case, you can negotiate with your seller that you can make a small additional commission if you help facilitate those deals where the buyer is not represented. So what that means is if a buyer goes and knocks on your seller's door and says, I don't have an agent, I don't want an agent, but I'd like to see your house and I might want to write an offer. And the seller allows them in, shows them the house, they leave, they call you and say, hey, your seller showed me the house, I am going to submit an offer, but I don't want to be compensated. That's going to, I don't want to pay an agent, I don't want to be represented by an agent, I'm not paying it, I'm just going to buy as a, buyer. I don't know what we're going to refer to these guys in the future, but there will be some buyers that will go around directly and not get representation so they don't have to pay anybody. Now, because they don't have a buyer representation or broker compensation agreement, because they don't have a buyer agent, the only way for you to make any additional income on that buyer would be if you negotiate this prior in your listing agreement with your seller. Okay, so Virginia has her hand up. Go ahead, Virginia.
I'm a little bit kind of worried about that, right? Hold on one second. I guess my concern would be if I'm representing what's the liability? Like, if I'm only doing paperwork?
You're not going to have any liability because you're going to have a buyer non-agency agreement signed that shows you have no fiduciary duty to that buyer
at all. So if
you're not going to do any paperwork, all you're going to do is you're going to send them the disclosures. If they sign them and they don't understand them, that's on them, not you.
Got you. So we don't have to interpret anything.
Nope. It just, the thing is that you're going to do a little more work as the listing agent because there's no buyer's agent. So you're going to have to talk to the buyer and say, hey, listen, you're running out of time. Your time periods are this. You need to return those papers I emailed you. I mean, you're going to have to do some communicating with them, but you're not liable for their understanding or misunderstanding of what's in the documents.
And I guess, Spanish speaking, that's not going to be an issue either. I mean, now a lot of it I translate, so that's not.
Well, you shouldn't be translating right now anyway. You should have an interpreter that translates for you.
I just read it. I read it to them, and then I tell them what it states.
I know, I understand that. That you shouldn't be doing that. You should have never been doing that. They should have had an interpreter there that understands Spanish and English and can read English and Spanish and understands the whole thing. They sign the interpreter translator addendum so that they can verify that what you told them in English is what you told them in Spanish is what's on the paper in English. Because if they can't read English, it doesn't matter who tells them. All they have to do is say, I didn't know what that said. She told me it said something different in Spanish. So
do you
regardless, you would have that.
Do you foresee these documents eventually being translated?
Nope. They will never be translated into another language. There's booklets, like there's pamphlets that translate it for them. If they want to read it, says, paragraph 3 is this, and it says it in Spanish, but they will not change the
Thank
forms.
you. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So if a buyer doesn't want representation, this is how you would get a little bit of a boost. Yeah. Who writes the RPA for the non-rep buyer? That's up to them. If they want to write it, if you write it and you have a non-agency with them, you're not going to be liable for how it gets written. Where can we find that Spanish? I think you have to buy them from CAR. So I would look at CAR and see what's in their store or whatever, that you can buy things from them. Okay, so that's that. The continuation of right to compensation for broker identified as prospective buyers. This is the section in our listing agreement now that we call exceptions. This is stating that if I was listed with an agent before, this is my listing. So what it's saying is that I put in here, let's say 180 calendar days after the listing period expires or cancels. If anybody who's on that list of exceptions comes in to buy the property, you still have to pay me. Seller. We have that already in the listing agreement. That's not new. And the same thing here, the seller's obligation to pay previous broker. We have that already. It's in the contract already in the listing agreement. It's nothing new. It's just changed some of the verbiage. Okay. I'm not going to go through the rest because I only want to talk about the stuff that has to do with compensation changes, because everything else is the same. It's just in a new format. And you guys will be fine, and we'll go into detail on those formats like we do when we do the listing contract class. Okay. All right, so let's go on to the next form, which, let me find which one I want to share with you guys. And I think what we'll do is, because people asked about this already and people have listing agreements already that are active. So this is the disclosure and modification to listing agreement. So if you have a listing agreement that is dated 12/23 or earlier, that is still active, when the change happens, you have to get this signed by your seller and included in your transactions or included with your listing agreement, okay? So basically what it's saying is it's talking about offers of compensation, that there was a settlement, and come August 17th that there will be no more offers of compensation in the MLS, and the listing agreement that you currently have with me states that we're going to offer a specific amount of compensation in the MLS. Now, we are not erasing your obligation to pay that compensation because you agreed to it in the contract. What we are stating, though, is that there is no MLS to offer it in, you are agreeing that the modification of this listing agreement is now that compensation, you're going to, my obligation to meet the criteria of what the MLS would have done is going to be the way I market my website, my door knocking, my negotiations with agents on compensation is going to be enough to satisfy that commitment of the offer of compensation that would have been in the MLS. The modification of the listing agreement, broker agrees to notify seller once the MLS will no longer be able to use the offer of compensation to buyer's broker. Broker also agrees to discuss the various ways a buyer's broker may be compensated. Broker agrees to use reasonable efforts consistent with the NAR settlement to continue to market seller's property and offer compensation to buyer's brokers to the maximum extent reasonably practicable. Seller agrees that the listing agreement term authorizing broker to cooperate and compensate brokers participating through the MLS will no longer be in effect, and the date the MLS prohibits such offers of compensation. Seller and broker agree that the total compensation shall or shall not be reduced by the amount authorized to be offered in the MLS. All other terms of the listing agreement remain in full force and effect except modified herein. So that's all that is. So that's what you're going to do. Any listing agreements that you guys have currently that are active, that will remain active, and even if they are pending and they will be pending past that date, you need to get this signed and have as part of your listing agreement. Okay? Any questions? Okay. And the same thing for any buyer representation agreements, just so you guys can see it. It's this exact same form, basically. It is any buyer representation agreements that you currently have right now that are revised 12/22 or earlier. If you have one of the ones that was revised, I think that the revised ones came out a little while ago. They just made some changes to this one. But if it's that 12/22 or earlier, then you have to include this if you have buyer representation agreements already with buyers you're working with, and you will be working with them through the August 17th date. Gabby, go ahead.
Hi, Kyle. Thank you for this. I have a question. If I have one right now pending, but I am representing the buyer closing in August,
it's okay.
Do I need to get that?
No, it's okay.
Signed?
It's the August 17th date is only for, well, you don't have a buyer representation agreement with them, do you?
No.
This is only if you have a buyer representation BRBC signed with them already.
Okay.
No, any buyers that you guys have in escrow, all those agreements that happened prior to August 17th, look, you could open an escrow on August 16th and it would still be by our old rules. Whatever you guys agreed on, commissions, the whole thing, it's the old rules. It's anything that goes into contract after the 17th. Okay. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
Thank you, Kyle.
You're welcome. Okay. All right. So let's move on. Since we're talking about, real quickly, I'm going to show you the RPA and the SPBB, right? Since I think this is probably going to be the majority of the ways we get paid. So let's look at the RPA real quick. This hasn't changed at all, but I just want to show you one thing. This section is paragraph 3G3. So I just want to remind you guys, 3G3, seller agrees to pay the obligation of buyer to compensate buyer's broker under a separate agreement. CAR form SPB is attached. So if I'm going to negotiate with a seller, let's say that the house is listed for $550,000 and I have an agreement with my buyer to pay compensation. Let's say that I would be okay if the compensation was, $15,000 or was $11,000, right? Because it's $550. So $11,000 would be the 2% that I agreed on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send the SPBB in and I'm going to say, hey, listen, my buyer is supposed to pay me 2% of the purchase price. We would like you to cover that difference of the 2%. We can make it a flat rate. So we're going to do this. We're going to attach the SPBB. We're going to send you the BRBC that shows you what I'm paying. And then you can just determine, like you would with any other credit, do you want to take that money from your net and pay me? Okay? So that's the section where you would ask for it. This is the form that you're going to use to ask for it. Okay? So seller payment to buyer's broker. Okay. The following terms and conditions are hereby incorporated and made part of the purchase agreement. The property, the date of the purchase agreement goes here, the property address, the buyer's name, the seller's name, the buyer's broker, right? So if it's us, it would be Century 21 All Stars would go there, not your name, and the seller's broker, whoever the broker is, not the agent, okay? The amount or rate of compensation is not fixed by law. They put that in there just like as on our listing agreements, just like everything else that says, hey, this is negotiated, okay? Subject to paragraph 1B below, seller agrees to pay buyer's broker bank percent of the purchase price or if checked, a flat rate out of the transaction proceeds. Okay, that's it. They're agreeing to pay the seller. Maximum seller payment obligation. Seller shall only be obligated to pay buyer's broker the lesser of the amount specified in paragraph 1A or the amount buyer is obligated to pay buyer's broker pursuant to their buyer representation agreement. And if applicable, less any amount that others have agreed to pay buyer's broker. If there is no buyer representation agreement, then seller has no obligation to pay buyer's broker. So we have to show them a copy of the buyer representation and broker compensation. Buyer representation regarding compensation. Buyer represents that as of the date signed the buyer below, buyer has a signed representation with buyer's broker and the amount specified in paragraph 1 is no more than the amount buyer is obligated to pay buyer's broker pursuant to that buyer representation agreement. And if applicable, less any amount that others have agreed to pay buyer's broker. Delivery of buyer representation agreement. Buyer authorized buyer's broker, and if applicable, escrow holder upon request to deliver to seller or seller's broker a copy of the portion of the buyer representation agreement identifying the compensation buyer has agreed to pay buyer's broker, such as the last page of the CAR form BRBC. Third-party beneficiary. Seller acknowledges and agrees that buyer's broker is a third-party beneficiary of this agreement and may pursue seller for failure to pay the amount specified in this document. So this is how we're going to negotiate in the offer that the seller is going to pay us for bringing our buyer along. That's it. That's how we're going to do it. Okay? Questions? No, you guys are all clear on it. You got it. I mean, look, it's pretty straightforward that this is what we're asking for. Go ahead, Armando.
Perfect. So once again, let's just say I called you're the listing agent. Hey, Kyle, what are you going to pay? I'm going to pay 2%. Perfect. So then I put 2% in there and then send that out with it.
Okay. Well, but there's a difference between what I'm paying and what the seller's paying. So you got to make sure that the question is correct, because if you put it here, this is the seller paying it. If the listing agent is going to cooperate with you, then it's not here that we put it.
Where would it be at?
There's a CBC for that. They've updated the CBC.
Okay. I think what we should do is probably a good thing would be have a class in the conference room where we could do the different scenarios, we'll like have scenarios up there so we could fill out the forms, as we're there to kind of get an idea, I think, because all these forms are being shot out, like thrown out at you. So I guess if we see it in front of us, when will those forms be available for us to print out? Are they already available now?
You could go to the CIR website right now and get the drafts. Some of the forms are already available in zip forms. If you go to the June update, like, you go to the libraries and your CAR forms, there'll be one that says June update, and they'll have the ones that they released already in June that we talked about in the past. These are going to be out on Monday in zip forms. I mean, the 24th Monday in zip forms. Yeah. But if you want to go to CAR and you go to the standard form section of the CAR website, you'll see a list of these that you can download them yourself.
I don't know. Do you think we could probably do that one day, Kyle? Maybe it'll be in the conference room and have the scenarios.
I don't see why not. I don't see why not. I don't see why we couldn't do that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Virginia, go ahead. Did I get you, Virginia? There you go. Go ahead.
So on the listing agreement, he agrees, the seller agrees to pay me 5%. Of that 5%, I'm going to put on my website that I'm going to share 2%. That would be submitted with a different form with the contract, correct?
Yes.
Now, if the seller wants to negotiate or kind of play with those numbers, he's willing to give me 3%. On the MLS, that's where I would possibly put, negotiable or
on the MLS, you put what is negotiable?
not on the MLS, I'm sorry, on my website. I would put that there's, submit your offer and provide the amount that you'd like to be compensated so that I can go back to the seller. Or should we definitely?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, look, it's all going to depend on, again, it's all going to depend on how you guys feel comfortable selling this to if you say to the seller, look, you pay me 5%, I'm going to be responsible for how we compensate the other brokers. The problem with doing it that way is, look, I've already committed to pay you 5%. Right? There is no commitment for you to pay anybody any specific amount. So what's going to go back to is this. It's going to go back to, hey, seller, you're paying me 6% because I'm offering 3 out, right? This is what everybody's done in the past, and this is why we got into this position. You're paying me 6 because I'm going to offer 3, and then the MLS you put 2. The problem with the idea that, hey, you pay me 5, and then I'm going to offer out 2.5 of that 5. Well, what if I choose not to because I don't like the agent? So I go to the agent and say, I'm only going to pay 1%. Now I'm still getting 5. So I'm still lying to my seller about why they're paying me the commission they're going to pay. So the danger in using that idea of I'm going to pay it, unless there's something in writing. Now, I could say there's a compensation schedule that says the seller is paying me 5% to represent them no matter what, but I've chosen to offer out this amount to a buyer. You'd have to probably put it in there in writing somewhere so that you're committed to that number. And if you don't, then you're liable for fraud. Right. Okay. But I think that's the idea. And the last listing agreement before they updated this one and did it, the last one had a thing on there that says, hey, here's compensation that you choose to offer out to the other brokers, right? Yeah. And they took that out because the idea is now that we're trying to, again, commit the seller to pay a buyer's broker, and that's not what the heart of the lawsuit settlement was. The lawsuit settlement was there is now no obligation for the seller to pay it. So what CAR wants to happen, what NAR wants to happen, what all the attorneys and everybody that I've listened to and watched videos of, they want to make it a part of the negotiation of the offer between buyer and seller, so that if the seller sees a value in the offer they're receiving to pay compensation to a buyer's broker, they will. If they don't, they won't. And so it's going to be up to us as the listing agents to be able to sell them on, hey, listen, we're going to entertain requests for compensation because X, Y, and Z, and this is the value to you of being able to entertain that compensation. I think we got to get away from where we were. Now, there is a CBC that says, hey, I will pay you, and that's fine. That exists. But I think we got to get away from that, hey, you're paying me to pay them stuff that got us into the lawsuit. I think it's got to get into the point where, hey, I'm telling you, buyer's broker, you better send us a compelling offer and request your compensation, and I'll negotiate with you and with the seller and try to make it happen for you. I think that's got to be where we go. And the conversations with the sellers are, hey, listen, you're going to get offers asking for you to pay compensation. You've got to be prepared for that, and we're going to negotiate and find the best offer, even with or without the compensation. That's just how it's going to work.
And it's just an additional term, basically.
Yes, that's it.
Now, my other question, I guess, as we have our websites, are you guys, Century 21 All Stars, planning to do anything on the company website where we can identify the compensation?
I don't know that we have the ability to do that because everything comes out of the MLS for our listings. So.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to have to kind of cut off some questions so we can finish stuff because, again, I'm not going to be able to go over this stuff until after they're out. But go ahead, Julian.
Good morning. Just, I guess, I don't know if you covered it already, or where it is on here. If it doesn't appraise, let's say the offer is for 710 and appraises at 700, and then the buyer says, well, or they can't pay for it. What happens in that case if it doesn't appraise?
So there's different scenarios. Are you talking about the seller is agreed to pay the compensation to the buyer's agent?
Yes. Let's just say that's the case.
Okay. So let's say that we negotiated this offer. It'll be just like any other concession. So if for example, I write an offer for $750, the property appraises for $7, and part of that $750 was the money they were going to pay me for compensation. Right, they agreed to pay a certain percentage or a flat rate. Then what they could say is, when we request to reduce the sales price from $750 to $700, they could say, well, fine, we'll reduce to $700, but we're no longer paying compensation, or we're reducing compensation by X amount, and they would have every right to do that. because once you start to negotiate one thing in an offer, everything is up for negotiation, right? This has been the truth forever, and we've talked about this in the past, where we talk about you ask for a credit, somebody says, hey, we have to reduce the price because of the appraisal, and they want to reduce the credit, and the buyer's agents flip out. Well, they're reducing the credit. Well, yeah, because they're making less money by agreeing to it. So yeah, that's open. That could happen. Then what happens is this: if you had the seller agree to pay X amount, let's say they were going to pay $10,000 and that would have covered the entire amount that the buyer owed you, and now they're not going to pay it, the buyer would be obligated to pay you the difference. Unless we could write things into the commission, the compensation agreements that would protect the buyers. But in that case, that's what would happen. Same thing if a buyer says, hey, listen, I'm going to buy this property and I'm offering $750 and I'm removing my appraisal contingency and I'm committed to pay the difference, and now it appraised at $700, so they got to come in with $50,000, so they don't have the money to pay your compensation. Well, then they either have to cancel the agreement.
Got it.
In order, because they can't pay you, they have to cancel. They can't not pay you if they're the ones who are paying you and it doesn't appraise, so they have to bring extra money in. Okay. All right, Marisol, last one, and I need to run through some things quickly. So go ahead.
Okay, so let's say we get an offer with the seller payment to buyer's broker, but we had agreed with the seller that that they were going to pay us 6% and we were going to pay the agent. Can we counter their offer to say, like, seller will not pay? And then use CBC?
Yeah, of course.
Got it.
The thing is, now everything is negotiable with the commissions and the purchase agreements. That's how it's going to be. That's just how it's going to work. Look, guys, this is how commercial real estate has been forever. There is no promise of compensation in commercial real estate. And commercial buyers, brokers get paid all the time, right? That's otherwise, why would anybody want to do commercial real estate and represent a buyer? You never would. You'd only want to have the listings. But commercial has been like this forever. I write my offer and say, hey, listen, I'm going to write the offer at this amount, and this is the compensation I want to get paid for submitting this offer. And the seller says yes or no and negotiates a different amount, or however they do it. So this is not a new concept in real estate. It's just new concept in residential real estate. So it's just, again, this is about negotiation and your value. You got to be able to now show your value to a buyer. Just like you had to with a listing agreement, you're going to have to do it to a buyer, because there is a chance this buyer is going to have to pay you something. They're going to have to at least commit to it. Whether you negotiate to get them off the hook, they're still going to have to commit to it, and they could be held liable for paying that commission. Okay, so real quick, let me run through some things here real quick. Just so, what I wanted to show you, the new thing they added on the purchase agreement is all the way at the bottom. Hopefully I'm not making you guys too dizzy. It's a long purchase agreement, but right here at the end, right here, you see 3 right here is the most important thing. Pursuant to the National Association of Realtors Standards of Practice 1-7, if buyer's agent makes a written request, seller's agent shall confirm in writing that this offer has been presented to seller. Now, that's always been a rule. Standard of Practice 1-7 has always been in effect. And I know that you guys as buyer's agents, you always get that thing like, oh, you get the email or the phone call, sorry, or the text, sorry, they didn't take your offer. But they never send you proof of presentation. They never send you that rejection piece back. This is the rule that requires them to do that. If in the past, it's always been there, if in the past you sent them something in writing saying, per standards and practices 1-7, I'm requesting written proof that my offer was presented. If they didn't do that, there would be a violation of NAR and the CRMLS. It's 2 violations for not presenting the offer. But now what they've done is they put it in the offer. It's stated there like, so, hey, listen, you've been warned. If you don't do this, then I can make written requests and you would have a violation. Okay, I just wanted to show you that was there. I like that it was there because I know that I've had conversations with you guys many times where like, they're not sending me proof that they presented it. My buyer doesn't believe they presented their offer. Well, here's now is your wording. You just send them an email. Hey, per National Association Standard Practice 1-7, I'm making a written request for proof of presentation. And if they don't do it, then you can report them. Okay. All right. Excuse me. Quickly, let me see what we're going to look at here. Let's look at the BRBC. Man, we're going to have to review some of this stuff after they're out because, it's like I said, since I'm not going to be here next week. So here's the buyer representation and broker compensation agreement. It is by default non-exclusive. There is a box that you have to check to make it exclusive. We'll talk about that. The date prepared, obviously, when you filled out this form, the buyer and the broker, right? The buyer's name, Century 21 All-Stars. Paragraph 2, these are the terms of the representation. The reference paragraphs are further explanations. So remember, these paragraphs that are listed in the second column, those are just explanation paragraphs. Those aren't the paragraph we're negotiating. This is. So paragraph 2A, A1, A2, B, B1, B2, all of this is paragraph 2, just like the listing agreement. Representation period, a begin date and an end date. Our current BRBC is just an amount of days, right? Now this, again, in this format, the same as the listing, same as the purchase agreement, beginning date and end date. These cannot exceed 3 months. I know that that's going to be an issue that people are going to be like, well, wait a minute, it takes sometimes 3 months in this market, right, to get offers. I get it. You can extend them. You can modify them. You can do new ones if this one expires, but 3 months is the amount of time. That's it. You cannot exceed 3 months. Now, it is non-exclusive by default. If I check this box, it is now exclusive, but it has to be initialed on paragraph 15 that it is exclusive. What that means, the difference between exclusive and non-exclusive is this. If we don't check that box and it is non-exclusive, if I don't show them the property, I don't take them there physically, I don't do a virtual tour with them, I don't write an offer on the property, I am not guaranteed the compensation. Okay, I have to physically take them. If it is exclusive, then even if they go on their own and write an offer, I could be protected in my compensation as long as it fits within the terms. Okay? So, always this is going to be exclusive, guys. Always, always, always. Okay? Property type. Single family, including condominiums or manufactured homes, or maybe they don't want SFRs. They only want manufactured homes and condos and townhouses, right? So you would check this box. If they're only looking for 2 to 4 units, you check this box. Or if it's everything, it's manufactured, it's single family, it's this, or they're only looking for 5 units, or it's industrial, vacant land, commercial, whatever it is. This buyer representation agreement is required for every buyer you work with, okay? If it's only for specific properties, then you would check the box and you could put see attached list of the specific properties that I am representing them on. The locations, what counties and what cities, and any additional descriptions that you may have about the properties that they're interested in. There's a form that you could check this box. It is not required to be in, but it wouldn't be a bad idea, and it's called the BIPP. And I will show you quickly what the BIPP looks like, and that is this right here. And the BIPP is the buyer's identification of preferences and priorities. So it's them physically writing down, these are the things that are important to me in identifying properties, the price ranges, what the property use is, the property type, the features, the locations, any other information, all this stuff. You can have them fill out and say, this is what I want. Now, you don't have to, but you could, and it's always a nice thing to know specifically in writing what they're asking for. But again, doesn't have to be included. It could be. Now, let's say, for example, that they had a buyer representation agreement previously, and that buyer representation had a clause in it, like this one will, I'll show you, that they had another broker that they signed with, and that broker gave them a list of properties that they showed them. If they have a list of those properties where that other broker would have to be compensated, they've got to tell you, and you've got to attach the list. Just like we did with listings, right? The amount of compensation, here is where you're gonna negotiate and put the amount of compensation, or you could do a compensation schedule, which, like I said, hey, listen, the compensation schedule says you're gonna pay me X if the price is this. If I get any compensation at all, from the listing agent, that compensation will satisfy your compensation to your obligation to pay me. You can negotiate any of those things that you want in the compensation schedule, okay? This is the continuation period, just like the listing. So if I put 180 days in here, that means that after our agreement expires at the end of that 3 months, if you go work with somebody else and I provide you a list of properties that I showed you during our time, you would owe me a commission if you go and look at any of those, okay? If it is non-exclusive, they can cancel immediately, or if you check this box, a number of days after you receive a notice that they want to cancel. In exclusive one, if they give you 30-day notice that they want to cancel, you have to allow them to cancel. Okay. And then there's a personal financial, the buyer's personal financial information. That's called the BFPI, and that is this form here that, where is it? It just states that they have the ability, right? It's all their financial information about whether they have the amount, what the money is, right? How much money do they have for deposit, how much they have for down payment, where the sources are. Like, I think this is good stuff for us to have. Like, having this filled out, we ask these questions anyway, but now we have them sign a form that says, this is how much money I have. Now it's like, it just makes, I think we're looking at it a wrong way. Like, this is going to be hard. I think this is going to make some of our jobs easier, because the stuff that we ask, instead of asking, is going to be written down on paper and signed and acknowledged by everybody. Okay. So this is just all their personal, their business and financial and personal info that you're going to want to attach this, because they have to give it to you anyway. If the buyer doesn't have, then you check this box. And if you have some kind of a loan product that doesn't allow them to pay, then you'll check this box. Okay. So we're not going to go into where that's that. And then again, we're going to go through it, and yes, we'll do stuff on how to fill this out. I promise. Let's see, Liliana, do we have a form signed for open houses? Yes, quickly. We're going to go a little past 12. I hope you guys don't mind. Let me see. Which, did I get the open house one? No, that's the cancellation. Sorry, I'm trying to look for the, no, you know what? I did. There is a form specific for open houses, and I forgot to add it. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I have it. Sorry, guys, bear with me. Let me get to my screen here. Let's see. Yeah, I think I have it here. No, it's not that one. Not that one. Sorry. Where'd it go? Darn it. I thought I had it. Let's see if it's here. Let's see if it's here. Sorry, I'm trying to find it. I know I had there is for open houses a specific form for you guys to have them sign before they come in. It's bothering me that I don't have it. Okay, well, we're gonna have to probably go over it another time, because I can't seem to find it. Darn it. Okay, well, my apologies that I don't have that. Look, we're going to have to go over this again, and probably what I'll do is, since Monday will be our first day back from being gone, the 24th will be my first day back from being gone. Next week, obviously, we'll be at Mike Ferry. Maybe what I'll do is I'll either do another one of these meetings on Monday, the day they come out, or Tuesday, and we'll do a couple that week. Well, we'll do, Tuesday and Thursday, we'll do it a couple times, just to give us time to look through this on the week that these come out. If you guys have questions, obviously you know how to get a hold of me. If you missed any of this in a little bit, it'll be, later this afternoon, it'll be up on YouTube. But I think right now we have, you guys have a week to be able to go to the CAR website. They're having town hall meetings, I think multiple times a week. If you go to CAR, you can register for those town hall meetings where the CAR attorneys are going over the same thing I am. They're letting you submit questions via email and trying to answer those questions as best they can. Try to get on any of those things you can. I would read these if you can. The CAR for you, all of you guys should have a a login for car.org. Go to car.org. Go to the standard forms section of the website. So I think it's under transactions. Go to standard forms and you will see a list of all the new forms. I didn't go over all of them because some of them are, related to leases and tenants and things like that. And we don't do property management a lot. I know we do some leases and we do work with tenants, but we'll work with they're just offshoots of these sale forms. So if we can get familiar with these, you'll be fine with those tenant and landlord forms. So I'll give you guys a couple minutes. Any questions before we go for today? And then I'll send you guys emails probably by Friday of next week and let you know, hey, look, we're going to do classes on Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, or whatever it is. It'll be different than just the normal contract class, but I'll try to get something a couple times next week so that or 2 weeks from now, so that you guys feel comfortable now that the forms are out. Anybody have any questions? No? All right. Again, you know where to get me. This will be on YouTube later. You have a question, you can always send me a text, call me. So what if my buyer goes to an open house with, I'm guessing it meant without me knowing, not with me knowing. There's the open house form. They have to sign in, and it has a section where they sign in and it asks them what their agent's name is. And if your buyer goes to an open house without you, if you have to have a buyer representation agreement, and if it's exclusive, it doesn't matter if they go without you. You're protected. Okay. Anybody else? No, I'm getting thank yous. I appreciate that. Thank you guys for being here. I know that this stuff is unnerving. I don't want to say scary. It's unnerving. It's right. We feel a little anxiety about things changing in our business. And we've all, those of us that have been doing this for a while, we've been through a lot of changes. I know I feel bad for people who are brand new, right? That have been doing this for a year or two, and, they've just barely learned how to do it the old way. And now they got to get thrown back into the fire again. And then I feel bad for us, old timers that got set in our ways and how we do stuff. And now we got to change up. So I get it. It's a little unnerving for both ends of the spectrum in real estate. So again, I'm a resource. You guys need something, you can always come to me. I appreciate those of you that jump on these classes because I know that it takes time out of your day. So thank you guys very much. I wish you the best. Good luck. Be productive.